He asked for her call sign as a joke, in front of the entire SEAL unit. The Admiral smirked. But when this female Navy SEAL answered Iron Widow, the room went silent. Seconds later, the SEAL Admiral was shocked, and the truth about her legend could no longer be denied. This isn't just a story about military rank. It's a story about respect, resilience, and a warrior who refused to be ignored. Before we dive in, tell us where are you watching from? And don't forget to subscribe, because Iron Widow's story is one the world needs to hear. Lieutenant Madeline Cross stood tall in her navy blue uniform, her face a portrait of stoic resolve. Unlike the boisterous crowd of Navy men around her, she neither smiled nor flinched as confetti rained down and applause erupted in the decorated hall of Naval Base Coronado. Behind her calm demeanor was a battle-worn heart. Madeline had spent years proving she belonged in a world that never expected her to survive, let alone lead. She wasn't just another officer. She was the first female SEAL to complete a high-risk black ops mission in enemy territory and live to tell about it. But the system wasn't built to celebrate women like her. She had earned every stripe on her chest through blood, grit, and silence. Across the room, Admiral Benjamin Harlow, a decorated war hero known for his ego and disdain for change, smirked as he approached her. He leaned in, voice dripping with sarcasm. "What's your call sign?" "Lieutenant Iron Lady." A ripple of awkward laughter swept the room. No one expected her to answer. But she did, and what she said next would silence the entire hall and change everything. Silence fell across the hall like a curtain dropping mid-performance. The room full of seasoned SEALs and high-ranking officers froze, eyes locked on Lieutenant Madeline Cross. She met Admiral Harlow's smug expression with unflinching eyes. Her voice was low, calm, but it carried like a gunshot. "Iron Widow," she said. A beat, then another. No one moved. Admiral Harlow's grin twitched. His fingers loosened slightly around the ceremonial glass he was holding. Somewhere behind him, a young recruit's mouth fell open in disbelief, because everyone in that room had heard the stories. Not official reports, but whispered accounts passed between deployments, told in hushed tones during late-night watches. They'd all heard of Iron Widow, the Phantom operative, who had single-handedly led a team out of a hostage ambush in Kandahar when the mission commander went down. Who was presumed KIA, then walked 3 days through enemy territory, half conscious, carrying her wounded teammate on her back. No one had ever connected that legend to a real person, until now. And now she stood in front of them, hands still cuffed from a disciplinary misunderstanding that was about to be very publicly reversed. Admiral Harlow blinked hard. "Excuse me," he asked, the arrogance in his voice suddenly fading. Madeline didn't repeat herself. Instead, she took a single step forward. "I didn't choose that name. My men gave it to me, and every one of them came home." The glass slipped from Harlow's hand. It shattered on the floor with a sound sharper than the silence. The hall erupted not with mockery, but with roaring applause, shouts. Some even stood and saluted her on instinct. Commander Jason Miles, a battle-hardened SEAL who had once doubted her during training, pushed through the crowd and stepped beside her. "You're the one from Operation Black Crescent," he muttered, more to himself than anyone. Holy hell. Madeline didn't nod. She didn't need to. Her record had been buried in red tape, sealed due to the classified nature of the mission. Most assumed the hero of that op was a ghost, or worse, a myth. But the truth had a habit of surfacing at just the right moment. Admiral Harlow, now visibly shaken, cleared his throat and addressed the crowd. This must be verified through." "Sir," interrupted Miles, stepping forward, "I was on that mission. I saw what she did. The only reason we made it back was because of her." Another voice chimed in. Then another. Officers from different teams, different commands, each recounting stories, piecing together the puzzle, all pointing to the same conclusion: the Iron Widow was real, and she had been standing in front of them all along. Harlow's face had gone pale. There was nowhere to hide. No procedural technicality could bury her achievements now. Not after this. Someone uncuffed her. No one asked permission. It just happened. And as the cuffs fell to the ground, so did the weight of silence and skepticism that had clung to her for years. For the first time in her entire military career, Madeline Cross stood among her peers not as a question mark, but as an exclamation point. She didn't bask in the attention. She didn't smile or bow or gloat. She stood as she always had, still, steady, unshakable. And for once, the room finally saw her not as a woman in uniform, not as an exception, but as a warrior. From the corner, a young female recruit stood teary-eyed, whispering to her friend, "I want to be like her." And that was the moment everything changed, not just for Madeline, but for every woman who had ever wondered if they belonged. The ceremony was supposed to end there, an impromptu moment of respect turned into an unforgettable public reckoning. But fate had one more twist planned. As the clapping began to settle and officers returned to their seats, a stern voice echoed from the back of the hall. "Lieutenant Cross, you're needed in operations. Immediately!" Everyone turned. It was Commander Leo Stratton, head of Naval Special Warfare Intelligence. A man rarely seen outside the shadows of war rooms and crisis briefings. His presence alone shifted the mood from admiration to anxiety. Without hesitation, Madeline stepped down from the stage and followed him. Harlow didn't dare speak. They walked through 2 security checkpoints before entering a small, dimly lit operations center. Inside, digital maps flickered with red zones and blinking icons. The air smelled of coffee, stress, and urgency. Satellite intel picked up movement outside Al-Makala. "An extraction team has gone dark," Stratton said, pulling up the live feed. "We believe it's an ambush. The commander in charge is Captain Ross. He's your old teammate, isn't he?" Madeline's jaw tightened. Ross was the only man she hadn't been able to carry out during the Kandahar op. He had stayed behind to hold off hostiles while she carried 2 others out. She never forgave herself for leaving him, though he later insisted she saved more lives that way. Now he was out there again, and this time he might not come back. Stratton pointed at the screen. "We need someone who understands the terrain. Someone they trust. Someone they'll follow without question. That's you. Cross." She didn't pause. "What's the loadout?" He raised an eyebrow. "You're not hesitating." "I don't have time to hesitate." Within an hour, she was suited up and en route. Word had spread across the base like wildfire. Iron Widows going back in. The phrase wasn't just said, it was felt, like a call to arms. Young SEALs who had only heard the legend now watched it walk past them in real time. Her chopper cut across the red-tinted sky as dusk bled into night. She reviewed satellite scans, memorizing escape routes, enemy positions, possible traps. She wasn't just leading a rescue, she was diving into the same darkness that had once tried to bury her. As the team landed outside the danger zone, radio silence loomed like a cloud. They began the hike silent, deliberate, weapons drawn. After nearly 2 hours of movement through rocky terrain and thick brush, they found a signal. Captain Ross's voice came faint and broken. "2 men wounded, surrounded, limited ammo. I won't make it out. Don't come for me." Madeline grabbed the radio. "Ross, shut up! We're coming!" There was a pause. Then a hoarse laugh. "Cross, you've got to be kidding me." That was all she needed to hear. The final mile was pure chaos. Explosions echoed in the valley as gunfire lit up the hillside. Her team moved with practiced coordination, clearing out enemy positions like ghosts in the night. She led the charge with a precision that only came from dancing with death before and winning. When they reached Ross, he was propped against a rock wall, bleeding, barely conscious. 2 others huddled beside him, defensive perimeter set but weakening. She dropped to her knees beside him. "I told you to stay retired," he muttered with a grin. "And I told you I'd come back for you one day." He coughed out a laugh, eyes watery. They airlifted them out just before reinforcements arrived. No casualties. Mission complete. But that wasn't the unexpected event. What stunned everyone, Madeline included, was what happened back at base. As she helped Ross out of the chopper, Admiral Harlow was waiting on the tarmac. He didn't speak, he didn't smirk. He simply walked up to her and saluted. A full, formal, chest-out military salute. Then, one by one, every officer on the field followed suit, a spontaneous formation of honor, built not from protocol, but from genuine respect. Ross, leaning on her shoulder, whispered, "Guess they finally figured it out." Madeline didn't say a word. She didn't need to. The salute should have been the end of it, a symbolic closing of the gap between who Lieutenant Madeline Cross had always been and how the Navy finally saw her. But sometimes, respect opens doors that strength alone cannot. In the days that followed the rescue mission, Madeline noticed a shift not in how people treated her, but in the way they looked at her. She was no longer the first female SEAL, or the cold, quiet enigma who survived Kandahar. She had become something more dangerous to the old guard, a standard, a benchmark, living proof that tradition didn't always know best. And no one felt that shift more sharply than Admiral Benjamin Harlow. Once the embodiment of old-school military masculinity, Harlow had ruled his command through hierarchy, intimidation, and inflexible expectations. Women, in his view, were valuable just not here, not on the front lines, not in the SEALs, and definitely not outshining his legacy. But that night on the tarmac, when he saw the woman he once mocked carry a wounded man off a helicopter while bleeding from her own arm, something inside him cracked. He couldn't sleep, not because he was angry, but because he realized he'd been wrong. For decades, he believed that control equaled strength, that obedience ensured survival. But Madeline had made a decision in that desert one that violated direct protocol, bypassed chain of command, and saved 3 lives. She'd made a call he would have punished any man for, and she was right. So 3 days later, Harlow did something no one expected. He invited her to his office. No press, no audience, no ceremony. When she walked in, he didn't stand. He didn't gesture for her to sit. He just stared at her for a long, uncomfortable moment before speaking. "You know what they call you now, right?" he asked. Madeline didn't respond. "Iron Widow. I used to think that was a damn joke," he continued. "Eyes distant, but it's not. It's a warning." Her brow furrowed. He leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "To the system, to the men in charge, you're the living proof that our rules are flawed, that our traditions are outdated, that we were too blind to see what we almost lost." She remained still, not out of respect, but because she'd been in rooms like this before, and she knew when a storm was coming. But then his tone softened. "I've spent my life building walls to protect the Navy," he said. "Turns out, those walls kept out people like you." He finally stood and walked around the desk, handing her a sealed file. "Effective immediately. You're being reassigned." She opened the folder. Her eyes scanned the words, Advanced Tactical Development Program, Commander Role, Direct Reporting to Joint Command. It was a program so secret, most officers didn't even know it existed. It trained future mission leaders, the minds behind the most dangerous classified SEAL operations in the world. "You're going to teach them what I never could," he said. "How to see the battlefield from angles we refused to admit existed." Madeline looked up slowly. "Why now?" He didn't hesitate. "Because I'd rather rebuild this house while I'm still in it, than watch it burn down after I'm gone." And just like that, the walls she'd spent her life fighting against began to fall, not with force, but with truth. That moment wasn't just about a promotion. It was about vindication. For every time she'd been doubted, for every time her silence was mistaken for weakness, for every woman who had been told, "You're not one of us." The next day, Madeline stood before her new class, a mixed group of elite SEAL candidates, male and female, hand-picked for strategic brilliance. She didn't open with a quote or a mission statement. She simply wrote 2 words on the board: "Prove nothing." Then she turned to face them. "If you're here to convince the world you belong, you're wasting your time," she said, voice firm. "You're not here to be seen. You're here to see what no one else can, to act when no one else will, to fight for those who aren't even watching." Silence. And then, one by one, the heads nodded, not out of obligation, but because they understood. The Iron Widow hadn't just changed the system. She had become the system's evolution. Commander Madeline Cross had spent years mastering how to survive within the rigid walls of the Navy SEAL structure. Now, she was being given the rarest mission of all, to redesign the blueprint from the inside. Her new post under the Advanced Tactical Development Program wasn't just a step up, it was a tectonic shift. For the first time, she wasn't fighting to get in the room. She was at the head of the table, and she wasn't just shaping future missions, she was shaping the people who would lead them. The facility was tucked deep within a classified base in Nevada, surrounded by endless desert and silence. But inside, it buzzed with the kind of energy that only exists when the stakes are life or death. Her recruits were the Navy's best, the sharpest thinkers, the fastest operators, the most unbreakable wills. Yet none of them had ever trained under someone like her. The first week, no one dared speak above a whisper around her. Rumors of her legend preceded her, some true, some exaggerated, all intimidating. But Madeline wasn't interested in legend. She was here for results. She tore up the curriculum on day 1. "No more perfect scenarios," she said flatly, dropping a pile of sanitized mission templates into the trash. "You'll train in chaos. You'll lead through confusion. You'll think on your feet, or you'll fall behind." Her training exercises were brutal. One week, she dropped a team in the Mojave at 3 a.m. with no gear, limited water, and a single encrypted radio that would go offline every 20 minutes. Another time, she split a unit mid-mission, feeding false information to half the team to see who would question command when it didn't add up. Some called her ruthless, others called her brilliant, but no one ever called her unprepared. Then, halfway through the 3rd month, she received a message that would change everything again. DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, wanted her to lead a joint experimental program, one that blended tactical operations with predictive battlefield AI, behavioral profiling, and next-gen threat response. It wasn't just a promotion. It was uncharted territory. The catch: the program would be housed outside military command, civilian oversight, direct access to Congress, political strings attached. It was the kind of assignment that killed careers, or made them immortal. She stared at the briefing file for a long time that night, seated in her barracks, the hum of the desert wind swirling outside. Part of her wanted to decline. She had only just begun to feel steady here. She finally had respect, a rhythm, a mission she believed in. But another part, one buried deep beneath the steel, whispered something else. "You didn't come this far to play it safe." So she said yes. The transition was immediate. Within 2 weeks, she was flown to Washington, D.C., briefed by defense officials, interviewed by the Joint Chiefs, and assigned a small team of elite analysts and operatives. They were younger, tech-savvy, unorthodox. She wasn't sure if she was leading them or keeping up. But what they lacked in structure, they made up for in innovation. And what she lacked in political finesse, she compensated for with clarity. While others talked in theories and hypotheticals, she spoke in one-liners that cut through the noise. The enemy doesn't wait for our algorithms. If your data isn't actionable in 3 seconds, it's useless. You don't win battles by predicting behavior, you win by responding faster than anyone thought possible. It didn't take long before Congress noticed. In a closed-door hearing, a skeptical senator asked her, "Commander Cross, why should we fund a program led by someone who openly defied protocol in Kandahar and bypassed chain of command?" She didn't flinch. "Because those men are still alive," she replied. "And if I had waited for your protocol, they'd be dead." The room went silent. By month's end, funding was approved. Her program Vanguard Initiative was born. It would become the most advanced tactical response network in the Western Hemisphere, blending human instinct with AI modeling, rapid deployment, and field-level adaptability. And at its center was the woman once mocked for her call sign. She never asked for a new title, but one appeared on the brass plate outside her new office anyway. Commander Madeline Cross, Director, Vanguard Initiative, call sign Iron Widow. This wasn't just a new opportunity. It was a new battlefield. And this time, she was designing it herself. The world now knew her name. Her face had graced classified briefings, congressional folders, and whispered conversations in defense corridors across 3 continents. Commander Madeline Cross, once a ghost in the system, had become the architect of its future. But inside, she was at war with something she couldn't shoot, outrun, or silence the loneliness that came with being first. Leadership at the top was quiet. Not the kind of quiet she enjoyed during recon missions, but a hollow, isolating silence. Gone were the camaraderie-filled nights by the fire, the whispered jokes in the trenches, the glances between teammates that said, "If I die, tell my mom I fought hard." Now, it was paperwork, policy, and pressure. She spent her days in polished glass buildings, surrounded by analysts and AI engineers who admired her, but didn't really know her. Every decision she made carried the weight of national consequences, and every mistake had the potential to cost lives. And yet, no one ever asked her how she was doing. No one ever dared. Until one night, she was alone in the Vanguard Command Center, staring at a wall of blinking screens. Red zones pulsed across a live satellite feed from East Africa, an operation she'd designed, now being carried out in real time by a team she'd trained but couldn't be with. Her fingers hovered over the console. She wasn't allowed to interfere. But the signal from Team Echo 4 was delayed. Something was wrong. The door behind her opened. She didn't turn. A familiar voice broke the silence. "Still working on your day off." She spun around. It was Captain Ross, his arm still stiff from the extraction injury, but his smirk just as infuriating as ever. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "Came to check if the Iron Widow ever sleeps." "Turns out, she doesn't." He walked over and looked at the screen. "This the team you trained in Nevada." She nodded. "You want to jump in, don't you?" he asked, gently. Madeline didn't answer. Her jaw was clenched. Ross stepped closer. "You're not just their commander now. You're their symbol. You trained them to be you. That means trusting they'll think like you when it counts." She turned away. Voice low. "What if they don't? What if I taught them everything except how to survive failure because that's what I had to learn the hard way?" Ross sat beside her. "You didn't survive failure. You became something because of it. That's what they're learning just by carrying your name into the field." Madeline swallowed hard. She hated emotional moments, but this one, she needed. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded photo. It was old, grainy, faded at the corners. A shot of their unit, huddled together in Kandahar, covered in dust and blood, smiling like idiots after cheating death. "We never got a chance to take a new one," he said, handing it to her. "Maybe it's time." That night, Madeline did something she hadn't done in years. She left the command center and walked to the training barracks. The recruits, young, tired, eyes wide with a mix of reverence and fear, snapped to attention as she entered. She shook her head. At ease. Then she did the unthinkable. She pulled up a chair. She told them stories. Not about winning, but about failing. The time she froze up under fire. The time she gave the wrong order. The night she held a dying comrade and promised to finish what he started. Her voice didn't crack, but her eyes, they softened. And in that moment, she stopped being a symbol and became something even more powerful. A mentor, a human, a survivor. After the session, one recruit stayed behind, a young woman with fire in her eyes. "Ma'am, permission to speak freely," she asked. Madeline nodded. "I used to think I had to be emotionless to make it in this world," the girl said. "But tonight, I realize strength doesn't mean never feeling. It means feeling everything and still standing." Madeline looked at her, quietly moved. "Then you're already stronger than I ever was at your age," she replied. That night, she placed the old Kandahar photo on her desk. Next to it, she put a blank frame. A reminder that the next chapter wasn't just about her legacy. It was about who came next. The years passed, not as chapters, but as battles won and bridges built. Under Commander Madeline Cross's leadership, the Vanguard Initiative reshaped modern warfare. Her methods became the gold standard for adaptive combat response. Her recruits went on to lead teams across the globe, from Arctic surveillance in Greenland to anti-insurgency efforts in Southeast Asia. But if you asked her what she was most proud of, she wouldn't point to a mission. She'd point to a moment. A quiet morning in the Vanguard courtyard. The sun had just risen, casting golden light on the concrete training field. New cadets filed in fresh, eager, uncertain. Among them stood a young woman with short black hair, olive skin, and a fire in her eyes that reminded Madeline of someone. Herself. The girl approached hesitantly, holding a letter. "Ma'am," she said, voice trembling. "My mother told me to give this to you if I ever made it here." Madeline took the envelope. Inside was a photo torn at the edges, faded but unmistakable. It was her, years ago, pulling a wounded soldier out of a burning vehicle during the Kandahar mission. Behind her, a young civilian girl clutched her mother's hand, eyes wide with terror. On the back, scribbled in broken English, were 5 words: "You saved us. Thank you." Tears welled in Madeline's eyes. The girl stood straighter. That girl in the photo was me. She paused, her voice faltering. "I don't remember your face, but I remember how I felt when you looked at me. Like I mattered, like I was worth saving." Madeline's heart clenched. In all her years of service, through the blood, the medals, and the secrets, this was the one thing she hadn't expected. Legacy, not in the headlines, but in a life rebuilt from rubble. She placed a gentle hand on the girl's shoulder. "You don't owe me anything," she said softly. "I know," the girl replied. "That's why I'm here, to earn my own call sign." And just like that, Madeline saw the future standing in front of her. Not in systems, not in strategies, in people. A few months later, Madeline stood on a platform at Arlington National Cemetery. The wind rustled the flags. The sea of white gravestones reminded her of the cost behind every decision, every sacrifice. It was retirement day, Her name had been read, her service honored, her medals polished to perfection. But none of it mattered compared to what came next. She took the podium, her voice steady. "I never planned to be remembered," she began. "I planned to survive." Laughter rippled through the crowd. I used to think silence was my strength, that if I said less, felt less, I'd endure more. But silence didn't make me strong. Purpose did. She scanned the crowd. The front row was filled with her former team. Behind them, vanguard officers, cadets, commanders, and beyond that, civilians, survivors, faces she recognized from faraway towns, war-torn streets, and rescue missions long classified. Some of you know me as Iron Widow, some of you just heard stories, and maybe some of you think you can't measure up to that. She paused, voice thickening. But I'm telling you right now, you don't need to become a legend. You just need to become you, fully, bravely, loudly. The crowd sat frozen. Madeline looked toward the horizon. The future doesn't belong to those who wait for permission. It belongs to those who show up, speak up, and stand their ground when no one else will. She stepped down to a thunderous standing ovation. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the Potomac, Madeline walked alone toward her car. But before she could open the door, a soft voice called out from the darkness. "Commander Cross." She turned. It was the young recruit again. "Did you ever regret it?" she asked. Madeline smiled. Not the polite, political smile she used in Washington, but the real one. The quiet, earned one. "No," she said. "I only regret that I didn't believe in myself sooner." Then she looked up at the stars. "For years, I waited for someone to open the door. Then I realized." She turned back to the girl. "I was the door." The story of Commander Madeline Cross Iron Widow is not about glory. It's about resilience, courage, and the quiet power of believing in yourself when no one else does. For years, she was underestimated, overlooked, even mocked. But she didn't fight for attention. She fought for purpose. Her journey teaches us that real strength isn't loud or flashy. It's in the silence before the storm. It's in the moments when you're alone with doubt and still choose to rise. The lesson is simple but profound. You don't need a perfect system, a fancy title, or applause to matter. Sometimes, just showing up, staying true, and doing the right thing, especially when no one is watching, is what shapes legacies. If Madeline's story inspired you, subscribe and hit the bell so you won't miss what's next. Share this with someone who needs a reminder of their strength. Thanks for watching. See you in the next story.